Yeah, so this is the follow-up to the session that we did in like January on the digital framework. And I've entitled this, It's Always More Than an IT Project. I'm going to talk for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then we're going to have three interactive sessions. So we're going to ask you to choose which block you want to talk about. But we'll go through that in a minute. So this is comes out of a few projects that I've been working on over the last 6 months where um, I've said to the client, why did you manage this like an IT project? Because it wasn't. Um, and for those of you who were at the session at the end of January, we talked about the digital framework and the 15 blocks. What we're going to concentrate on today is digital strategy, the way we work, the platforms and tools we use, how we use data, information, and content within that, and projects and why they all matter. So, yeah, this is about learning from each other, sharing our challenges and frustrations, and celebrating successes. So please do share the wonderful successes you've had with all of this, because having done digital transformation or something like it for the last 27 years, I know it's not easy, but there are great things that come out of it. And let's talk about our challenges. And we will pause the video if you don't want to be recorded about the challenges and the frustrations that come with that. So context is really important for this. And having said that, it's always more than an IT project. I want to start off with a couple of questions, and I need a volunteer to answer these, so just jump in. Um, I think any project that you ever do is grounded in the mission and purpose either of yourself or your organization. So, why do you go to work? Who'd like to start? Don't make me pick someone. Or if I do, I'm going to pick Kate. And I didn't even prep this, sorry.
I think Laura was about to come
Oh,
in.
sorry, Laura. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I work in sustainability, so we're working on trying to make sugarcane, which is a big agricultural crop, less polluting, better for the environment, respect human rights. And so that as a purpose of the organization is really a lot to do with why I go into work, is that I kind of understand my role in the whole team and how I'm sort of contributing to that and how the work I'm doing with systems contributes to that. So I feel quite clear about it, but sometimes it's a bit tricky to evidence.
Yeah,
Um, so
abs
that would be interesting to learn from others. Like, how do you, because change happens slowly sometimes, and or the really deep changes in something like a digital system when it comes to culture and capacity can just take a while to bed in. So yeah.
Laura, that is absolutely perfect. Thank you. I suppose what are the benefits of the digital systems and the ways you work at Bonsucro, and what that brings to sustainability?
We've always managed a lot of information because we have a sustainability standard, so people have to submit their information to us, and it was managed all in PDFs and emails in lots of different formats, in very big spreadsheets that were starting to break. And so we've had for the last 2 or 3 years like a really clear plan, like a roadmap to try and address some of those problems. But it's starting to spin out into we're at a point where we're like, okay, do we continue to treat this as a project, or do we want to sort of mainstream it, or do we call it a phase two? And how do we take loads of good work that's happened where these systems basically mean we're working better, we can offer more, we can get more out of our information, we can find the problems easier now. All of that has happened in the last 2 years, but now I'm sort of trying to really explain how the changes made a difference to the system, and I'm finding it difficult to articulate a bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's always hard. But what you've really clearly articulated there are the benefits to the organization and the benefits to the mission.
Mm.
And whilst you talked about moving from PDFs and Excel spreadsheets to other systems, it's not an IT project, right?
Well, no, not really. It's
Yeah,
many, many, many interconnected things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Laura, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So we talked about, I think, four quartets in the previous session. So I've reframed this in the last few months to the five lenses. Um, and these are the things that I think you should use as kind of lenses, focal points whenever you're thinking about something that you think is an IT project or somebody told you it's an IT project. And those five things are impact, financial sustainability, staff well-being, service quality, and digital and operations. So how stuff happens with what. And Laura's talked very articulately about kind of those changes in digital and operations, which has that impact then on the other aspects of those lenses and the wider mission and the wider organization. I think three things really matter. So when somebody comes to me as they did by an email this morning, and I don't know whether they're well, they're not definitely not on this call, but whether they watch the recording or not, and go, Simon, I need some help because we need a new CRM. And I'm thinking that's probably not the problem. So three things really matter: the outcome and result of what you do, the workflow, how it happens, and the experience, how it feels. Because you might have the best systems in the world and wonderfully efficient workflows, but if your staff and your external users feel horrible using them and it's really difficult, which probably suggests it's not the most efficient workflow in the world, and you don't have a good outcome, then so what? Because nobody gives a damn about your CRM, intranet, website, or funky code unless it makes them happy. And that's all about, as Laura's just said, benefits realization. So three things I want you to keep in mind. And Kate, if you wouldn't mind popping the link in the chat to the framework page where we've got the link
Five.
to those two PDFs.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hannah has beaten me to it.
Because I realize I'm kind of throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you now. But three things to keep in mind as we go through today. What are you trying to achieve? Declare it, agree it, know where you're going, so everyone's on the same page. You can't deal with what you see, can't see, and don't know. One of the worst things about trying to do digital transformation without mapping it out and making it visible is it just makes your head hurt. And without strategy and articulated choices, the priorities are set by whoever shouts loudest. And I think we've all been there. Okay, so these are the five building blocks that we thought we might talk about today. And it's 12:47, so I think we're going to have 15 to 20 minutes for each session. Kate, have you got the poll for people to pick which ones they would like to do? And we'll take that then in order of people's preferences.
Yeah. Is it worth you just doing quick summary? I know we've got slides for each of them, but before people vote on the poll, maybe it's
right. I'll get my
useful for
summary
them
page so I can see what we're going to talk about. So, digital strategy is about setting choices and priorities and the logic of achieving them. Ways of working is about how you get the work done effectively to meet the objectives and the map of what you do and where you could improve. The tech stack and platforms and channels is how does IT and your tools fit together to be more than the sum of its pieces. Data information and content is how data serves the mission and how to find what you need. So we might think about integrated data systems, knowing what you have and where. Somebody can even talk about GDPR if they want to. And projects is about the structure and discipline to get the right stuff done at the right time with cleared roadmaps and discipline. So that's essentially the five blocks in summary. So pick what your preferences are that you want to talk about, where you've got things to share, and we'll see how popular the five things are, and then one of the four of us will pick. We'll think through it. Right.
I've done a multi-select poll, so you can select up to 3.
Okay. I always love live results coming through. It's great. Hey, digital strategies coming up on the outside.
I think, yeah, and is that if we've got 5 submissions and as co-host, we can't vote to skew the responses. Is that everybody voted? Cool. I'll end the poll, show the results. So it looks like we've got digital strategy, tech stack, and project, how it happens as the 3 front runners.
Cool. Right. And I think, if I'm right in thinking, Sid, you were gonna lead the intro to tech stack. So
I might just bat it back to you, Simon. Given how small this group is, I think let's maybe we'll even have enough time to do sort of all 5.
Yeah.
So why don't we?
Do we do the digital strategy first?
I think tech stack was more popular, wasn't it? So should we do that
Oh, I
first, and then
see.
Let's
digital
start with that
strategy and
and
then
then
projects?
Cool.
So we kind of suggested some bullet points here for kind of things that we might talk about. And remember what we're we're interested in successes, we're interested in challenges, we're interested in frustrations. But the 4 things I always think about when I think about the tools are: what do you have? What's it for? How well is it used? How well does it work? Because let's face it, we've all got tools in our personal or organizational tool set where we don't really know how to use them as well as we should, and it doesn't make that much difference. So, yeah, opening it up to, and yeah, sorry, Sid, kind of stole your thunder a little bit there, but over to you to facilitate this bit.
Thank you. Yeah. Do people want to come in and sort of, if you don't want to speak, you can put it in the chat as well.
Don't make Sid talk about civil service IT. Sorry, Sid, that was.
I mean, I'll just give you an example. A personal example is we moved from the kind of Google suite to Microsoft. And this was like, for me, it wasn't such a big deal. It was like, oh, I have to learn another thing. But there's several people who are still complaining, and this is like happened a year and a bit ago. So is that's what we have, and what we use it for is pretty much everything. And I think how well it's used for me is getting into a territory where the issue for a lot of people is that they've not been trained on it. So there's no kind of knowledge that they have. It's just kind of you learn on the job, and then if you make a mistake and so on, there's really no way to address that. So that was kind of clocked quite early, and then now there's like training programs and so on. So it only works, I think, as well as the people who are using it understand how it works, in my opinion. Um, that's exactly it. It in Google, I felt it was intuitive a little bit more, but Microsoft, there's just so many things, and it is a bit like piecemeal, and we have to try and cobble them together to get certain things done. And like for me, the biggest kind of annoyance is every sort of 3 weeks there's a new version of the GPT that they're using, and it's like, okay, should I use that or should I use like the deep research one or so it's just like, and I'm pretty tech savvy, and and I'm facing these issues, so I'm just a bit like head scratchy about what about people who are kind of not as comfortable with things like this. um, yeah, so I'll stop there if others want to share or come in or...
Um, sorry, it's Laura again.
Of course,
One thing that
please.
we have quite a lot of systems we've been trying to get best use out of. We've got MS 360 and we use Salesforce as well for our member management and our certification. But one of the things we're finding now, for example, we got a new form builder so that we could bring information in through online forms and put it straight into our systems. And one of the problems we're finding at the moment is if we've got interoperable systems, every time one of them changes something, we'll have something that is working beautifully, and we'll come back to it sort of for the annual process a year later, and somebody's run an update or changed a checkbox to a drop down or something, and it breaks systems that were working. And so we're now sort of finding that we have to keep a real close eye on the maintenance of this kind of shifting sand on two sides of a connection. That every time one of them runs an update, there's the potential for it to break something that works, and that's quite a workload for us. So I don't know if that's something other people have good ways of keeping track of, or sometimes you don't know there's a problem until it properly breaks. So
I mean, it is the literally the suppliers, the providers move fast and break things, and they break your things. I mean, I always hated that phrase when Zuckerberg first came out with it in the first place. But yeah, I mean, I have similar experiences being a volunteer who helped run Drupal and CVCRM integrated system for a very small organization. And yeah, every time they patch something, because we've got customizations, it just breaks a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm kind of like, this is what I need to test every time you do an update. Otherwise,
yeah.
yeah, I share that pain and frustration, Laura. Um, I'm I mean, other than kind of keeping an eye on what comes through and being aware of what your kind of basic tests are, I'd be really interested to know what other people have got in terms of if they've cracked that problem.
Just to repeat, we're happy to like pause the video in case you want to share something that you don't feel is for public knowledge.
Jack, I know you said you didn't want to be on YouTube, but you don't have to have your camera on. But you work with a lot of law centers. I mean, what's your experiences of this?
Um, I don't know. I mean, we use Microsoft, and yeah, some of our law centers, they're not on the national tenant that we've got.
Mm,
And yeah, I think we do just rely on our support partners for our IT support. But yeah, it's I don't think there's ever a perfect solution. It's just you choose something and then you try and make it work. So yeah, I'm not too involved in that side of it, but um yeah, I think what we've got, it works well, and yeah, it is what it is.
yeah, and I think just going back to Laura's point, the more systems you have and the more complicated those systems are, the more likelihood is the interoperability breaks. So
Yeah.
if you're on a Google Suite tenant or a Microsoft 365 tenant, you can do your planning, your training, and whatever else. And if you're clear the things that you have and what you're supposed to be using it for, and you train people and support them, and it's used well and it works, that's fine. As soon as you start multiplying things through, and I I started mapping out a tech stack for the number of different things this small organization used, and I got to 13, and I kind of gave that to the one of the trustees, and he said, how are we using 13 bits of technology, Simon? I'm just like, I don't know, you put it together. Sorry, that wasn't terribly helpful, was it? But he was like,
Yeah.
and actually, I did say, I don't know, you put it together. But that is the thing. These things just grow because they grow organically, and these are the kind of real world consequences. And I think sometimes we talk about this a little bit about being intentional when we talk about strategy. Knowing what you have, and I suppose getting rid of the stuff you don't need is a really important perspective in this.
And I think you touched on something there, Simon, that we see all the time with small charities we support, that they're not documenting. You know, somebody new joins the organisation, there's nowhere for them to go to see what tools there are. People set things up and leave, you know, it's not. So
Yeah.
just having a list of the tools with what they're for. And I think the other thing there that's kind of leads on from those bullets is what those tools could do that you're not that you're not utilizing. And Microsoft 365 is a good example there, isn't it? With all, we also come across groups using it for the bare minimum, but there's a huge amount of apps in that kind of toolkit that they could be exploiting and making the most of, that are part of their tech stack, but they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other thing for me is the complexity of when you don't know what you don't know, how do you find the time and where do you go to find it out? Yeah. Sorry, folks, there's no blueprint about this is the perfect system. And if you use it, all these problems will go away. Well, if there is, somebody else has found it, not me. Any more thoughts on challenges, frustrations, or even successes?
I think, like, just to Kate's point, that I see charities quite often, like, because they don't understand the full availability of what's within some of the things that are inside their tech stack, they're duplicating stuff. So it might be overly complicated. They could probably do the majority within one subscription to one product, but instead they've got 3 or 4 and then struggle with the interoperability. When actually, if they really dug into and understood the capability of 1 or 2 of the products that they're using, then that could just hugely simplify it. But they'll often reach to a new product because because it does one thing well, and then it sort of really overcomplicates the whole thing.
And I mean, we're not going to talk about the ways of working block in this session, but as I mentioned, a colleague client who contacted me about the CRM project, and I'm thinking, right, I know what they do because I've known the organization for a while, but what is it you want this CRM to do? How do you want to work? What are the outputs you want to get out of it? Because there's no point just saying you could use CRM A or B or C or D or E until you've got that clarity. And that's the bit that's often missing, rather than just kind of pick functional things and look at the shiny brochures and go, hey, I'll use that. Yeah. Sorry, 27 odd years of digital transformation does make you slightly cynical about this stuff.
I'd like to say something about the amount of changes that charities and small organizations go through, where different people come in with different personalities, with different ideas, and experience of using different technology. That tends to force or direct change or innovation within an organization. When that person leaves, somebody else comes in and he's got a different idea again. So it's staying focused on a specific technology or on a specific project is hard for charities to focus on.
Great point, Marcus. I think Laura, you had your hand up again. Oh,
yeah, sorry, I just put something in the chat, but you had asked for any examples of successes and you mentioned a CRM. We had been underusing our CRM for years. It had become sort of just a different kind of filing system almost. And the way that we managed to get way more value from it was working out how to build the dashboards. So how to get good reporting out of it and build dashboards and do it in a really quite simple, user-friendly way. Because what the staff had found in the past was that they were putting information in, but they weren't really getting that much information back out. Well, they were getting information, but not insights. And so once we'd got a handle on how to present user-friendly information for people better, it changed the way that they did their admin. Also because it was easier to see where their gaps were. So it was easier to see if things were out of date because we had good reporting. And so the CRM hadn't changed, but the way people used it changed. And part of it was actually through simplifying things and saying, okay, these are the key key pieces of information that we want to get right all of the time. They go in the report, and then people can see and keep on top of that. And then over time, we were able to sort of retire things that were too busy on the screen and get rid of fields people weren't using or things that were obviously out of date, so that people had a better idea of what was relevant. But we weren't adding fields at that point. We have now. We've sort of, now that we've got a good way of working with it, we've added a lot to it. But that was the first step, was just helping people see the information in a different way. And I've found that with other CRMs as well. I've worked with other small charities that had case management systems for family support, and really having it user friendly on the screen made a huge difference to whether people did their admin or not.
Yeah, yeah. If I can remember this off the top of my head, there's an acronym used that's used in change that's called EAST, and it's something about easy, accessible, social, and timely. And I think it's a key thing. Kate talks about kind of rationalizing, simplifying, and pruning things. I I suffer from talking too much and putting too much information in reports and enjoying too much data, but sometimes if you strip it down to the essentials, you get a much more effective thing. Any other thoughts on tech stack, or should we move on to digital strategy? I'll take silence as confirmation then. Okay, so block one, and I think the fundamental for me around so much of this stuff is being intentional and being clear about what we want to do. So digital strategy about setting choices and priorities and the logic of achieving them. And there's four big questions. This is based on a strategy model called Playing to Win, which is an organizational strategy model that came from a guy called Roger Martin in Rotman School of Management in Canada. And these four bullet points kind of iterate. So you start with your aspiration about what you want to achieve, then you think about where you want to play, where you want to focus your attention, and you think about kind of how to win there, what success is going to look like, and then you think about the capabilities needed. I've used this model for digital strategies, organizational strategies. I've even used it for helping people make their databases better. And there's something for me about it, and going back to Marcus's point about how you stay focused and people change, experience changes, and we all invent something new. I think if you got this clear strategy, it helps you drive things forward, and it certainly helped me when I was in house at Legal Education Foundation. A whole bunch of projects that I've done as a consultant in different organisations of all sizes over the last 15 years. Any thoughts on digital strategy? Successes, challenges, frustrations. Do you even have one? Or do people go, we don't need one of those because it's too complicated and we just want to get on with things and do stuff?
Sorry, I was just looking at the Playing to Win strategy toolkit for a moment.
Well, I think a digital strategy is the best way to keep organizations focused on their ultimate goal. And it should help. It should help keep them focused on that specific goal. But you know, technology also changes very fast, and things may different things come into play, or cut or different kind of technology can ultimately take over, and before you know it, everybody's jumping on that. Just looking at Zoom, it wasn't until we went into lockdown that took over as the main video conferencing software around the place. But before that, there was other technologies people was using before lockdown. I think lockdown really pushed Zoom to be the main platform for video calls and networking in this way. But it happened very quickly, you know. A lot of the other technologies that were available at the time, they they changed it. They had been around for years, but the way the rate or the speed that Zoom took over, it was very quick. So I don't know. Technology changes quickly, so that means your digital strategy can ultimately change.
Marcus, can I push back a little bit on that? Because I'm looking at a uh, I'm looking at a copy of some notes I've got when I built the digital strategy model with the team for Legal Education Foundation.
Okay.
And there's only three. I think I've counted 21 bullet points in this strategy. So the Playing to Win strategy model, these four questions and management systems underneath it fit on a single page. Only three of those mention specific systems. And the specific systems they mention are Microsoft 365 and Salesforce, which were the core underlying tools. Everything else is technology agnostic. So it's a digital strategy, but there's not, other than we were committing, and we thought about this really carefully. We were committing to working with Microsoft 365 and we were committing to working with Salesforce because we'd invested a lot and we felt it met our needs. The rest of the points in that strategy document didn't talk about specific platforms.
Okay.
And to give you an indication, and look, I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong way of doing this, but to give you an indication, I think I used this example when we talked about digital strategy in the January session. The aspiration we set, and bear with me because it's a little bit long, we are a digitally enabled, people-centered, data-informed organization, not data-driven, providing a seamless grant-making, evidence-building, and policy influencing experience, because those are the three things we did, built on skilled and effective use of secure platforms. I use that aspiration and digital mission nearly every day in my job because someone would come to me and say, "Can we do this?" And I'm just like, "Well, how does it meet the mission? Where does it fit?" So I guess that's the thing that I think sometimes people have a tendency to put too much plan into the strategy, and I think the digital strategy and the plan are slightly different.
Okay.
I've put my hand up, Simon. I'm being very formal.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Don't know why I did that. I'm just thinking about the conversation that you and Marcus have just been having, and then reading Laura's comment in the chat, where so Laura's saying it made a huge difference, but it was a big investment to create a meaningful one, and they had lots of different priorities. So I'm wondering, like, is there a sort of what is the simplest, smallest version of a digital strategy that you think an organization could create that was like a really useful starting point that they could perhaps build on as they understood their more priorities unfolded?
I'm just thinking Laura might have answered the question. But I suppose on its simplest level for me, and please do look at Laura's response in the chat because I think it's really good. What is your aspiration? I mean, I think you can knock up, and I say knock up. I don't think you get a final version, but I think you can knock up a digital strategy in 3 or 4 one-to-one conversations and a 2-hour workshop with a bunch of people. And you go through those 4 questions. What's our aspiration? Where do we want to focus our attention? What's success going to look like there? And what capabilities do we need? And I remember doing another project where we essentially did what I called a database strategy. And what came out really quickly in that 2-hour workshop was I've got nowhere to manage my work. And we were talking about a system that was essentially a CRM. So we designed the client had designed, and what I was working on was helping them work with this system that stored relationships and everything else. But the person who was looking after this system, who used it on a daily basis, had nowhere to manage that work. So there was kind of tasks in email, there was stuff coming through Slack channels, there was all sorts. So actually, one of the things that came out of that is the capability I need is to do work management. Because if we can't do work management, the rest of the system is no good. It's a data dump. It's a very important data dump, and it's structured really well. But yeah, I think if you answer those four questions, and you will need to go back and forward because you set your aspiration, you go, right, these are the capabilities we need. Well, we can't do that. Then you change things about. But that's what I would say is the kind of easiest way to start. And you grow and evolve it. You don't need this kind of big shiny document that looks fancy. You certainly don't need that at the beginning. And Laura, I absolutely acknowledge that it's a bit painful and challenging to get there. And sorry, I'm juggling my windows a little bit here. But the big thing for me about strategy is it's about choices. And as I unfortunately said to a client at about 6:30 after a very long day, when she related to me, this was a deputy chief exec, that she had 233 priorities. And I said, well, which are the three most important ones? Because you can't possibly do all those. And I'm very grateful she didn't slap me at the time, because I probably deserved it for a comment like that. But it is the reality. If we don't make choices and we don't articulate them, how the hell do we expect the rest of the organization to be able to how can we expect the rest of the organization to know where to focus their attention, and how do we get the right systems that we need?
I'm loving Laura's answer. I'll get interested to answer my question. Just one other thought, Simon, around this, because there's more and more noise about the importance of getting digital trustees on boards. And I think possibly because there is sort of a lack of digital strategy happening within charities. What do people think about that? Do they have this kind of support that they need from their board to enable them to do this? Is this even like a board's level of responsibility in terms of that strategy, or is this like purely executive? Is there a way in which we can reach out to those sort of non-exec roles to support us with this work?
I think digital trustees is a good idea, but it's also whether the trustees or the board members have the knowledge or the experience of technology or technological changes, but it can ultimately keep the organization focused on a goal, so that if anything happens below that, if director leaves or manager leaves, they can keep it on track, keep the project focused on that specific goal. But I think digital trustees is a good way of keeping the organization aligned. And I think we've used them in the past too.
Can I bring my 27 years of cynicism back, and a very, very real example here? I think we should be a little bit careful what we wish for. I remember working in Manchester with a group of small charities about 20 odd years ago. And they'd managed to, as part of what was then a geographic program, they'd managed to recruit a whole bunch of trustees from some of the big IT firms in the Northwest, and they'd put them into these small charities. And the people that they brought in were used to running tens of millions of pounds projects. So they made all these recommendations about kind of what to do, but they didn't understand the reality of an organisation that was turning over £200,000 to £300,000. And I think there's a balance between, well, firstly, there's that operational and governance separation, and I get that trustees in very small charities weigh in and get their hands dirty because they have to, but there is that governance separation for very good reasons. And I'm also mindful that context is really, really important. So it's not just about the expertise, it's about the expertise and the experience and where that plays out in context. And sometimes you can get very smart people who can make unhelpful decisions. And whilst I think digital trustees definitely have a role to play, they're not always easy to get. And I think any trustee who can ask good questions is an absolute credit to the board, because often it's we're thinking of going in this direction. We're like, have you thought about that? Have you thought about that? And it's that perspective. Laura, you've got your hand up again.
Um, Partly because I am a trustee for a small charity, and what I notice in my work and as a trustee is that the staff often know best what they need, but having a board that understands it's worth the investment. So I'm not necessarily a digital trustee, someone who's, I agree, it's really tricky if somebody's coming in with big ideas that other people don't understand. But certainly having board support for investing in something like digital infrastructure, I think there has to be a level, it helps if there's a level of understanding about the potential of that. And digital infrastructure is not easy to get a grant for. So it normally involves like using unreserved funds or something like that. And getting approval just helps if people on the board have a sense of the value as well, even if the staff are the ones kind of driving a recommendation. I think some digital literacy among the board is really helpful.
Absolutely,
Thank
100%.
you. Yeah.
I'm just going back to those five lenses again about the digital systems, the right digital systems, and how you use them in the context of your mission will have an effect on your impact, your financial sustainability, your staff well-being, service quality, and obviously how you do things. Laura, I think that's a great point. Thank you. And Kate, thank you for your comments in the chat. Absolutely agree with those as well.
I just wanted to quickly say I was on the board of a volunteer center as well, and I ended up being that digital trustee. So there might actually already be somebody there who's quite tech savvy, digital savvy, IT, whatever it is, digital strategy, or you can just maybe upskill that person so they already know how the organization operates, they already know kind of the needs and so on. So you don't necessarily need to like parachute in somebody from a big tech firm who only knows £1 million projects, 100 million pound projects, whatever. So that's another thing to think about is can you just upskill the person, one of the people who's already there, who's already kind of on that path.
And just to say, I've got nothing against volunteers because from big tech firms, because I've worked with a lot of them and they can be fantastic. It's just, I think context and awareness, and as Kate said, the time it takes for stretch teams to move forward and implement are really key to this. I'm conscious about time. Should we move on to our third block, which is projects? And the title of this was It's Always More Than an IT Project. So this is about the structure and discipline to get the right stuff done at the right time with a clear roadmap and the right disciplines. And five things I think are really important here: clarity of benefits that the work and project provide. Laura talked about that at the beginning. There is no such thing as just a CRM project. And I think the more organizations get clear on that, the better. What are our priorities? What's first urgent and must do? What capacities do we have? What's realistic? Going back to Kate's point about the difficulties of stretch teams and not having much money. How are we getting it done? Who drives what are the accountabilities? And what's the overall roadmap or backlog? So thoughts, challenges, frustrations, successes on this.
Well, if I may, I'll pick up 2 points just from the last conversation. One that Laura had mentioned about it being difficult to secure funds for IT projects. So I wondered if anyone had got any examples of where they've been successful or how they've managed to package IT projects maybe into other funded pieces of work. And then the other reflection, thinking about the digital trustee element, is when I was at the Key, one thing that worked really well for us is that when we were doing big IT projects, is that we got a board member to be a sponsor of that project, so that it wasn't, we had someone else at that other level being able to continue to report back to the rest of the board. So it wasn't just me going back asking for more money, or trying to explain why things were stalling or faster than and so that what I found that a really useful way to use board members to keep a project on track.
And thank you, Hannah. And I think that's one of the key things about the accountability, about who's got still use this phrase, who's got skin in the game to be able to drive this forward, that it's not the IT manager or the IT volunteer. And Laura, absolutely, capacity is always a challenge. But I mean, this is the core for me, that I think when we look at IT projects, in inverted commas, as IT projects, people don't really care about them. People say, oh, you're the technical person, or you're the supplier, we'll just kind of get this done, and this should be not very much money, because we want to spend money. And I've had this pushback in organizations I've worked in and from funders. We want to spend money on people and all the wonderful things they do, and on services, and on helping our beneficiaries. And I'm going, yes, but we can't do that unless we invest and have the right systems in order to make the job easier, in order to make this whole thing sustainable, and all the rest of it. And it's never a kind of straightforward thing. But I think that clarity of benefits, and the reason why that was bullet point number one, this comes up on so many projects that I work on. It's just like, you don't want a new CRM. You want a new CRM for something that is going to impact your charity's mission. Otherwise, it's just a tool, and the old adage that if the only tool you got is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. Jack talked about co-development and co-ownership, not to overly rely on individual voices. Chances of feedback and keeping flexible. Yeah, absolutely, Jack. I think there's also something about kind of how we manage projects, and project management is a skill in itself, and not everybody has that. But as Sid said, we can skill people up on things. And my real frustration with this is when I go into an organization, a bit like the deputy chief exec, who had 230 odd priorities. You go, oh, we're trying to do 65 projects and there's 4 of us. Just go, that ain't going to work. You're not going to be able to deliver them. You're not going to be able to deliver. Sorry, this sounds terrible, sir, but I think you can foresee that you're not going to be able to deliver them. You will find that out for real in the next 2 to 3 years. You have to make a choice, and I get that is really, really difficult, because it talks about it means trade-offs, and it means you have to say no to things. And I've worked in children's charities projects, I've worked with schools, I've worked in kind of really disadvantaged communities. It's really difficult to say no, we can't do that, because that might mean, I don't know, a child doesn't get fed in breakfast club at school. But you have to make hard choices, because you can't do more than you can physically do. And if you try and do 100 things at once, nothing gets done well. Yeah, absolutely agree, Kate, about continuous feedback. Yeah. There must be some wonderful stories about projects. And if anyone wants to pause the recording, we absolutely can. Yeah, accountability and shepherding. I think that shepherding is so key. Yeah. Oh, and definitely project managers who welcome feedback. The last thing you want is a autocrat who just follows the plan that they wrote 2 years ago, because that never ends well.
And how about sort of institutional memory, I guess? So I'm thinking like, so sometimes just, oh, do you know, we tried that and it didn't work, so we're not gonna, we put a load of money into trying to start this thing, and then it didn't work, so we're not going to go there again. And that might be, at any level, I guess, within the organization. Frontline workers are like, oh, just another thing. We've been there and these things never work. I mean, I guess that I'm not really raising a question, but maybe that's to Laura's point there about more about, that co-design and that discovery phase is really important to make sure that people feel involved throughout the whole process.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I learned that I didn't know 27 years ago is the importance of taking people with you and how to do that and how to shepherd and sometimes you have to tell people, yes, we can do this, no, we can't do that. But having that buy-in and having that cross accountability and having that single shepherd, or as I was referred to on a project the other day, Simon, I'm Mr. Shepherd, you're the sheepdog, but hey, if that works. I don't know what that was saying about. Anyway, Laura's raised her hand, so I won't go any further with my analogy.
Oh, it was just something you said about what you can say yes to and what you can't say yes to. And that's something I think me and my colleagues have learned quite over the last kind of year or so is thankfully my colleagues are quite accepting if I say, we can't do that now. That's not a phase one thing. We can't bring that feature to you now, but it's on the list for later. And what we are going to deliver is this fundamental bit that you've asked for. And that clarifying, that was really useful when we were designing things to say, is this a phase one request or is this a phase two request? How fundamental is it? Essential, desirable, whatever kind of categories you want to use. And thankfully, we are a very collaborative team and people have been good at bringing forward their ideas so you understand what the big picture and the direction of travel is, but chunking it up and bringing it back down to what do we do next has been a bit of a learning curve for us all because we are quite inclined towards the bells and whistles and saying, well, eventually we need to get to this. And so me and my colleagues have become better at sort of saying, okay, we've heard what the bells and whistles need to be maybe in the future, but right now, are we agreed this is what you need next to make things better? And that's that, it's been a bit of a culture shift to take things in smaller pieces, but it has been accepted, thank goodness. And the other thing around the clarity of benefits, one of the things that we stopped. We were talking about efficiency at the beginning, but what we've realized is we can't promise that people are going to have less work to do. So now what we talk about often is shifting from, let's say, not low value work to high value work, but like instead of doing admin, you're going to have your time for strategy, for example. And so it's not that anyone's got less work to do. It's that the nature of the work that takes your time can be refocused on things that require your kind of big expert brain. You're the best person at what you do, and having you do data entry is not a good use of your time. And so that kind of shift from low value work to high value work has been quite useful to us as well when talking about benefits.
Yeah, and I think being able to hook things onto benefits is absolutely key. I remember a project I worked on not too long ago where part of the original benefits case was about efficiency and hey, this will make your life easier. But it was an organization that focused quite heavily on compliance, and they'd never had a single organizing system before. So actually, when the new system, which was so much better and produced so many organizational benefits and made a lot of people's jobs a lot easier, it also, by definition, because it had to, made some other people's jobs harder. And that was just the nature of things. It wasn't a bad thing. They didn't set out to make people's jobs more difficult, but because the expectations in the organization had changed and what people needed to do and how things needed to be recorded and where, there was no way of making those particular jobs easier. Laura, have you raised your hand again?
No, sorry, that's a hang
No.
up.
Okay. Any other thoughts on projects?
I would just like
I
to say, sorry, I should have put my hand up. I'd just like to say, just understanding projects are different, and you've got to rely on different people for different types of projects to succeed, and it may mean you're working with relying on third party suppliers or in-house skills or upskilling people to make the project achievable. So which can affect the project in different ways.
Absolutely, Marcus, and I guess you make a big point, a good point, and this is my interpretation of it about the control you've got over some of those things. So, in terms of in-house, you've got more control over your resources. If you're working with external suppliers, sometimes you're at the kind of mercy of whether they are going to do something, and if things overrun or things get challenging or the project runs out of money, it's quite difficult. But I think that's the key thing about kind of good project management. And one of the things I always talk about in terms of projects is the importance of a project initiation document and who are your stakeholders, how are you going to go about this, and all the rest of it. What are your benefits? But I talk a lot about pre-mortems, which are just post-mortems done in advance. So if you had to do a risk, not really that much different from a elaborate risk assessment, but if you had to think 2 years forward and everything that might possibly have gone wrong with this project, and how would you mitigate that and stop that happening? And you put that into the planning and resourcing of the project, that often changes the game. Because I mean, I've done enough post-implementation reviews and various things to go, yeah, okay. I think we've kind of all seen these things coming. But yeah, I think doing a pre-mortem and having a clear project initiation document and having those clear benefits and making those choices and as Laura said, that point about kind of, well, we can't do this now, but we can add that to the roadmap do make a difference.
And that links a bit to Hannah's point about where there are, that memory within the organization of something not working and then some resistance there. It's building in some time to reflect on why that didn't work and what you could do differently this time to get to a better outcome.
William, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what other people had said previously about complexity, because that does seem to be a big limiting factor in a lot of projects that I've seen. So people tendency to try and complicate things and add in all the bells and whistles at the beginning, and just keeping it simpler and just doing the minimum. Going with the idea of sort of working in an agile way and having your minimum viable product, just doing what's the minimum that you can get away with for now, and then you can think about adding more at a later date. And there's much less risk in doing that, and you're much more likely to be successful rather than just building a big complicated system that's then difficult to manage and maintain.
100%. And I remember going to a CAS session where they talked about the differences. Like, do you need a Rolls Royce or some fancy car, or do you really just need a skateboard because you just need to get from A to B? Yeah, absolutely. I think my only pushback on minimum viable products is they do have to be viable. Sometimes organizations, and I've had suppliers who go, well, with that budget, we can do the minimum, but maybe not the viable. I'm just like, right, okay, we're not going to do this then. But yeah, no, great point. And I think agile is key, but that's why I think clarity of benefits and priorities are really important, because I think you need that to guide agile. My frustration, and again, 27 years of cynicism, which I might use as a title for a blog post at some point in the future. Agile is not an excuse for screwing it up as you go along. And that's not to say there are some fantastic agile projects in this sector and the wider world, and there's some brilliant agile providers who use the methodology really well. But I've seen it used too many times, and it's always a frustration for somebody going, "Hey, let's just start and see what happens." And that brings us back to move fast and break things that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's important to be clear where you're trying to get to in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to make a quick point about expert suppliers as well, and just sort of reflecting back on some of the bigger digital transformation projects we did at the charity that I used to run. And I remember like having an idea about what it is that we needed, what the benefits were, and I was quite clear on all that sort of stuff, but I didn't have a clue about the how. And then I went out to talk to potential suppliers, and lo and behold, every single one of them told me that their specific bespoke solution happened to be exactly what I needed for the problem that I had, and just found it so difficult to, because it was so far outside of my knowledge and my comfort zone to be able to assess who was telling me the truth. And in that instance ended up actually bringing in some pro bono experts from other organizations who had no sort of like vested interest to help me assess the options. And so I wondered if anyone else had experienced that sort of problem, maybe what they did to get around it.
I've worked in charities where even just for things like the website, because of the way it had been chosen, every time a change needed to be made, it came at a cost. And so sort of learned over the years if we are using an external service, to build in a really good chunk of the deliverable as training the staff and handing it over, like giving the keys back, so that we're not tied to ongoing costs to get them to do things for us, which I think probably has shifted a bit now, but certainly at the time it felt like a trap. And yeah, with sort of the idea of not knowing enough to make a good decision when everyone tells you they've got the right answer. I think going out to peer organisations has always helped us with that. See who other people use, see how, if they've got a system that's a bit better than ours, how they would define the brief for that kind of thing, and looking at other people's systems to get a better sense of what I need before I go and talk to companies about what they can provide, make sure I've got the right kind of requirements clear. Or if I find myself getting bamboozled, taking some of that back to a peer organisation to make sense of it before making a decision.
Yeah, and I think I'd echo that. I mean, I've done. I certainly wouldn't describe myself as the technical end of the spectrum. I understand IT and I understand digital, but I've often been that translation partner for a charity who said, "We want to do this. These are the bunch of people we think we can help, who we think can help us, but we just need you to make sure they're not basically trying to sell us a pup or something, if I can put it like that." And Laura, your point about launching a system and what happens afterwards, I think you have to plan change management right in at the beginning. And I think that the thing for me is benefits don't arrive the day you launch the system. Benefits arrive afterwards, and they don't necessarily arrive in a hurry, and that's just the nature of things. So you definitely need to give systems time to transition. Training, maintenance, support are absolutely pivotal to having successful things. Otherwise, I think you just end up with bright, shiny toys. And I think every project should have a snagging phase and an embedding phase to be called a real project. I'm a little bit conscious of time, so unless there's any other points on this, I'm going to skip through all of this. Kate, Sid, which one of you are doing the wrap up?
I think it's Kate.
Okay.
Are you okay to do it?
It's probably me. I'm just multitasking with the feedback form. So yeah, thanks everybody so much for coming today and for your input. We will come back out to you. We will add the recording and slides and the other resources that Simon's put together onto the TechSoup Connect event page. I'm just going to send a link in chat. It's a very short feedback form. It's really useful for us to hear what's been good for you. There's also a chance for you to suggest future topics. Do stay on if you've got any further feedback and questions. We'll kind of close the session formally in a minute. Yeah, you might want to share stuff in chat on that next slide, or stay on and have a chat about the relevant events or resources. But otherwise, thanks everybody for joining us, and do go if you've got a 2 o'clock meeting. We kind of change the timings a little bit, so you've got some space if you do need to go off and prep. And thanks, Simon, for pulling it all together too.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a great discussion, and I definitely think some blog posts to come out of this.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your candor and everything we shared today.